Well, how's this for a new study? Finding that the bubonic plague, which ravaged human civilizations throughout history, continues to impact our health today. By analyzing the DNA of centuries-old skeletons, scientists found gene mutations that helped people survive the plague. But those same mutations are also linked to autoimmune diseases that afflict people too. Let's take a closer look.
In the 14th century, a mysterious illness gripped Asia, the Middle East, Europe and Africa. It decimated populations across the world and changed the course of history. In just 3 years between 1347 and 1350, it wiped out a third of Europe's population. It was called the Black Death. It didn't discriminate between young and old, rich and poor. So frequent was the pace of death that the dead were often buried in mass graves. Only a thin layer of soil covered them before more men and women were buried on top of them.
The Black Death killed 30 to 50% of the population. So it's a massive event, right? In COVID, things were not great, but we are very, 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 very far from those type of statistics, right? It probably killed, 0.0 some percent of the population, right? It's a very, very different scenario.
Scientists say the Black Death, the second recorded pandemic of bubonic plague, was the single deadliest event in recorded history. Bubonic plague was spread by the bacteria Yersinia pestis. It was passed from rodents, mostly rats, to humans via fleas. There have been 3 major pandemics in recorded history: 541, 1347 and 1855. A new study by Barrero and his colleagues has found that the plague that reconfigured history also altered European genomes.
What we decided to do was to target specific genes that we believed to have been important in the context of an immune response to a pathogen, such as Yersinia pestis, the agent that causes the Black Death.
And what they found was a gene called ERAP2. This gene breaks down dangerous microbes, effectively recognizing and containing the bacteria. But it comes in different versions. For some it works and others it doesn't. It's passed on from parents to offspring. And it turns out that survival gene is linked to autoimmune disorders such as Crohn's disease and rheumatoid arthritis. Scientists say more study is needed to understand that deadly chapter in the world's history. But they believe the gene mutation is the strongest selection in humans to date and an example of humankind's ability to overcome deadly disease.
And who better to help us sort this out than Dr. Bharat Pankhania at the University of Exeter Medical School, joining us live from Bath in the UK. All right, doctor, I think whenever we hear about the bubonic plague, there's a sort of shiver that goes into your spine to think that, yes, it is still around today. But explain to us, it doesn't really pose the same threat that it did in the past, correct?
Well, hopefully. The word is caution, because if you have the right background where, you have, say, a refugee camp, lots of people crowded, and then you have the Yersinia pestis circulating amongst rodents, it could be a infection that can spread in such circumstances and also today have devastating consequences. So it has not gone away. And if the circumstances were right, of course you can get outbreaks of bubonic plague today.
Does this study show definitively that if you're a person who is prone to rheumatoid arthritis, you are more immune to bubonic plague?
It seems to indicate that whilst these experiments were obviously done in the Petri dish, we believe that there is a reasonable body of evidence that what gave you protection against bubonic plague thousands of years ago may also have given you a vulnerability to other immunological illnesses like Crohn's colitis, rheumatoid arthritis. This is the same sort of lineage as what we look at with malaria and sickle cell trait. So if you have sickle cell trait, you have protection against malaria. Unfortunately, if you have sickling condition, you can also suffer from sickle cell disease under certain circumstances. It's a similar analogy.
Got it. Okay, so what do you glean from this study? Why do you think this is important for us to know?
Well, it just shows to us that there are evolutionary pressures and evolution happens, and as a result, our genetic makeup may be modified as we go along. These are not things that happen all the time. There are rare events. You need something big like the bubonic plague to actually have a significant effect on changing and determining your genetic makeup. A bit like, again, as I say, sickling amongst the African continent. That's where you get most people with sickle cell trait, because malaria has been present there in that part of the world.
Also, sometimes I guess it's worth reminding us that as ravaging as the COVID-19 pandemic was to families and economies, it didn't wipe out a third of the population like a pandemic similar to bubonic plague did. I mean, we got off somewhat easy.
Absolutely, of course. So in the scheme of things, the bubonic plague wiped out between 30 to 50% of the population. That's huge. And then those people who survived went on to influence the genetic makeup of a lot of people today. Whereas the SARS-CoV-2 pandemic is a killer of a very, very, very small number of people in comparison to bubonic plague.
Absolutely. Dr. Pankhania, always good to talk to you. Thanks.
Thank you.